Hey guys, tonight we travel somewhere lush, loud, and unforgiving Imperial China. You step outside your hut, the morning air thick with wood, smoke, and expectations, and the rooster hasn't even finished crowing before you're already in trouble. The wrong robe, the wrong tone of voice, the wrong direction to face while yawning, and that's your social credit down the latrine. You thought modern life was demanding? In Imperial China, even your silence has to be appropriate. And if you're not noble, not born male, or not Confucius level obedient, let's just say you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up not to an alarm, but to the clatter of bamboo blinds and the distant shouting of hawkers already out selling congee and fried dough sticks. You groggily sit up on your sleeping mat, which is woven from coarse reeds and offers exactly zero back support. Your lower back whimpers in protest, but you know better than to grumble, because grumbling might mean disrespect, and disrespect is a one-way ticket to a flogging. You glance outside. It's still dim, but the courtyard bustles. Someone's already scrubbing the tiles. A rooster is in full opera mode, and the cook is boiling rice water that smells like yesterday's feet. Welcome to dawn in Imperial China. You're expected to be upright, dressed, and obedient before the first bell tolls. Breakfast? Only after morning chores. And don't even think about coffee tea only, and even that's a luxury if you're lower class. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most people in Imperial China live by a strict daily rhythm governed by social rank, family duty, and seasonal cycles. Sunrise wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. The state wanted bodies in motion. You're either sweeping, scrubbing, or sewing. If you're elite, you're reciting Confucian texts. If you're poor, you're wringing out your only pair of pants and hoping it doesn't rain again. You go to dress. Your robe has no buttons, just long sashes and folds that require actual strategy. Tie it wrong and you'll look like you just survived the brawl with the scarecrow. The wrapping goes left over right if you're alive. Right over left? That's for the dead. Yes, even getting dressed in Imperial China has a body count. Your neighbor, a wiry old man with suspiciously dark teeth, squints at you and mutters something about your sash being sloppy. You fix it. You bow. You don't smile too much because that's frivolous, but you look just respectful enough to avoid being seen as arrogant. It's a performance and you haven't had breakfast yet. By now, the family elder is awake. If you're part of a large household, you're not just waking up for you. You're waking up for a ritual. Every morning includes ancestral veneration lighting, incense sticks, bowing 3 times before the family shrine, and offering a pinch of dry rice. Not optional. You skip it, and you're cursed with bad harvests, weak sons, and a probable case of divine indigestion. Quirky tidbit alert. Some families believed sneezing during the incense offering meant a ghost was displeased with you. So now you're holding in a sneeze, blinking through the smoke, and panicking because last night you accidentally dreamed of dumplings instead of your great-grandfather. Oops. If you're lucky, someone hands you a bowl of watery millet porridge before you collapse. You sip it, trying not to slurp, too common, or drink too slowly, too lazy. And whatever you do, don't speak before spoken to if an elder is present. You're not a person with ideas yet, you're a sponge for instruction. And your job is to soak. The day's labor is already planned. Rice planting, silk weaving, market hauling, or exam cramming, whatever your station, your freedom is minimal. Want to go for a walk to clear your head? That's a suspicious activity. Want a nap? That's a public disgrace. You're a tiny gear in a big Confucian machine? Historians still argue whether the average peasant had any real sense of autonomy or self-determination. Some claim village life offered moments of joy and community. Others argue it was a tightly wound system of obligation wrapped in fear and duty. You feel both, somehow. You want to joke with the girl washing vegetables, but you also want to avoid eye contact in case it's interpreted as flirtation or rebellion, or both. You're constantly watching your words. Even casual greetings have layers. Have you eaten? Is the polite hello, but if you say it wrong, or to someone clearly hungry, it can feel like mockery. And don't speak too directly, indirectness is prized. Being blunt is rude, being loud is shameful, and being funny, risky. Unless you're the emperor's jester, and you're not. There are no weekends, by the way. The lunar calendar gives you occasional festivals, but you'll spend most of them preparing elaborate meals and bowing more than you breathe. You do your tasks, clean your corner, follow the routine. The rhythm of life isn't built around your convenience. It's built to keep the social order humming. At the communal well, you meet a kid your age hauling water in wooden buckets strapped across his shoulders. You nod. He nods. You both know better than to speak unless necessary. The silence is heavy, respectful, and slightly ridiculous. Later, you'll hear someone got caned for laughing during morning drills. You try not to imagine it was because of a fart. You get through the morning, barely. You didn't insult an elder. You didn't trip over your robe. You didn't sneeze on an incense stick. You're surviving, but only just. Your stomach growls, your knees ache from bowing, and you're about to learn what happens when you interrupt a scholar mid-recital. Brace yourself. You shuffle into the courtyard again, still rubbing the sleep from your eyes, when a sharp voice slices through the air like a blade through rice paper. A scholar is reciting aloud from the Analects. And guess what? You've just walked in mid-stanza. You didn't bow. You didn't kneel. You didn't even pretend to know which Confucian verse he was on. That's 3 strikes. You're toast. His gaze turns to you slowly, like a lazy snake considering a mouse. Respect, he intones, is the root of harmony. You nod quickly, almost too quickly. Your spine locks. You bow. You shuffle backwards without turning your back, because turning your back would suggest you think you're above him. And you're a speck of lint on his embroidered sleeve. At best, he goes back to his scroll, lips moving rhythmically, each syllable so familiar it sounds more like breathing than speech. You know that routine too. If you're male and born into even a remotely literate family, you're expected to master this ritualized drone from age 6 onward. Why? Because one dream, one sliver of hope, floats above all others in Imperial China civil service exam. Mainstream historical fact: the Chinese Imperial Examination System, or Keiju, was the backbone of bureaucracy for over 1,000 years. It was meant to reward merit, not birthright. But here's the kicker. Passing it required absolute memorization of Confucian texts, often word for word, with 0 mistakes. Let that sink in. No open books, no cheat sheets, just you, a brush, and enough sweat to float the yellow river. You remember when your cousin tried, 3 years of study, and all he got was a bleeding wrist and a permanent eye twitch. He never made it past the provincial level. Your uncle says he disgraced the family. Your cousin says he's happier selling buns. You believe the cousin. Even the lowest level of the exam, the Xingguani, is brutal. You're expected to memorize thousands of characters, interpret moral parables, and compose poetry in regulated verse. The exam halls are prison-like, narrow booths, barely wide enough for your knees, with one plank for writing and another to sleep on. Some test takers died in them, literally, of stress, heat stroke, or ambition poisoning. Historians still argue whether this system truly created a meritocracy or just another elite class with better calligraphy. Sure, in theory, a peasant could rise to power, but in practice, The cost of preparation, hiring tutors, buying paper, not starving meant most real candidates were already halfway up the ladder. You trudge past the scholar and toward the study area. Even if you're not eligible for the exam, say because you're a woman or too poor, you're still expected to respect it. Reciting Confucian texts isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's a moral one. You hear the phrase filial piety so many times it starts to sound like a noodle dish. Now, if you're actually in training for the exam, your day is structured like a monastic boot camp. Wake up, recite, copy, recite again. Break for tea so weak it might legally qualify as hot water. Then more copying, more reciting, and finally a few hours of trembling under the weight of your ancestors' expectations. Quirky tidbit time. Some elite families hired crammers, basically academic drill sergeants who would follow you around, whispering Confucian maxims into your ear at dinner or mid-bath. One tale speaks of a boy who memorized all 431,000 characters of the 4 books and 5 classics by age 11. Another story says his tutor died of boredom. Of course, memorization wasn't the only goal. You also had to master moral judgment, interpreting abstract ideas like loyalty and righteousness, and applying them to fictional political dilemmas. A farmer lies to a magistrate to protect his starving wife. Is he disloyal or virtuous? You pick the wrong side and suddenly you're branded unfit to rule a village latrine. You practice your calligraphy with shaky hands, your brush slips, the ink blotches, you stare at it like it's a wound. In Imperial China, handwriting isn't just aesthetics, it's proof of discipline, control, intellect. A messy scroll? That's a reflection of your messy soul. Go clean it up with tears. The weird thing is, this whole system really did offer one path to power. If you passed Miracle of Miracles, you became a genchi, a scholar official. You wore robes with embroidered cranes. You got a hat with wing flaps so wide it could pick up radio signals. People bowed when you passed. Even your sneeze gained prestige. But don't get excited. Most people failed, again and again. Some took the exam into their 70s. There are records of men who died still clutching their final test results. One guy supposedly cried so hard after failing that his tears dissolved the page, probably apocryphal. But poetic, no? You step back from your practice board and breathe. Outside, you hear a child being lectured in tones so sharp they could shave bamboo. He misspoke a quote from Mencius, and his grandmother's having none of it. You wonder briefly what it would be like to live in a world where learning wasn't a performance, where you could read for joy, not just status, where you could sleep past dawn without guilt. But in Imperial China, there's no such thing as idle education. Knowledge is a sword and you're either gripping the handle or staring at the blade. Your hand cramps. You stretch it, wincing. And just as you're about to close your scroll, someone taps your shoulder. A local magistrate is coming by. He wants to inspect the village's promising students. You have 3 seconds to decide whether to stand tall or fake a cough and run. Spoiler, there's no safe answer. You freeze, mid-stretch, brush, still hovering over the inkstone like it might save you from this moment. A magistrate? Here? That's like your school principal, your boss, and a tax auditor all rolled into one, but with the added benefit of absolute legal power and, depending on his mood, the authority to ruin your entire lineages standing over a crooked character stroke. You stand, you bow, you whisper a polite greeting through clenched teeth while doing a mental check, robe folded properly, hands clean, face neutral, breath not too oniony. This is the gauntlet of surviving a surprise official visit in Imperial China. Fail it, and you're not just embarrassed, you're culturally annihilated. The magistrate arrives, flanked by attendants holding scrolls, ink, and the faint aura of dread. He inspects your calligraphy with narrowed eyes. There's a smudge near your interpretation of benevolence. Great. Nothing like your career being judged by a rogue dot of ink. Mainstream historical fact. Magistrates in Imperial China were not only administrators and judges, they were moral overseers. Appointed after passing high-level civil service exams, they were expected to uphold Confucian ideals in every corner of the empire, including how people dressed, behaved, and yes, wrote. He says nothing, just nods and moves to the next unfortunate victim. You exhale, knees weak with relief. Someone nearby mutters a quiet prayer. You all go back to work like nothing happened, but now the atmosphere is radioactive with anxiety. After the magistrate leaves, you hear a rumor he was inspecting for a potential school promotion, maybe new funding, or maybe someone's about to be punished for failing to memorize the filial admonitions. Hard to say. Imperial bureaucracy is equal parts poetry and paranoia. You head home before dusk. Night is no time to be caught loitering. Imperial curfews are strict, especially in larger towns. You pass a tea house where the local gossip monger is mid-story about a scholar who insulted his examiner and was made to sweep roads for a year while reciting poetry as penance. Quirky tidbit. Some examiners were known for being pettier, poetic, depending on who you ask. There's one famous case where a candidate was rejected not for poor logic, but because his poem didn't rhyme properly. Another failed because his ink was too watery. Scholars still debate whether this was cruelty or an artistic flex. At home, your mother greets you with a bowl of cabbage soup and a reminder that your cousin is getting married next month. She's younger than you, she adds, with the finesse of a dagger. You nod, smile politely, and spoon your soup like a Confucian monk trying to eat serenity. Marriage, in your world, isn't a personal journey, it's a family transaction. If you're male, you're expected to provide stability and honor. If you're female, you're expected to be obedient, fertile, and decorative, ideally in that order. And if you're poor, well, hope you like being someone's bargain dowry. Historians still argue whether arranged marriages in Imperial China offered emotional fulfillment or were merely tools for securing social order. Sure, there are stories of love and devotion, but there are just as many of teenage brides shipped off like parcels, or husbands who treated affection like a seasonal allergy. You lie down on your reed mat, still thinking about that magistrate. What if he'd asked you to recite something? What if he'd caught the ink smudge? What if you'd sneezed mid-bow? The stakes of daily life here are dizzying. Every gesture is a performance. Every sentence, a potential test. Your younger sibling bursts into the room beaming with pride. I drew a dragon, he says, holding up something that looks like a drunk snake in a thunderstorm. You pat his head and offer a diplomatic, very spirited. He beams harder. Someday, maybe he'll take the exam too. Or maybe he'll open a tofu stall and live twice as long. The oil lamp flickers. A neighbor shouts something about goats. Someone else is banging a pot rhythmically, probably chasing off evil spirits or a persistent rat. You can't tell anymore. Sound and superstition blend like soup and rice in this world. Before bed, you kneel again before the family altar. More incense, more bows. Your grandmother corrects your posture with the urgency of someone defending a sacred dance move. You try to feel something spiritual, but mostly you're focused on not sneezing again. That's become your main character arc today. Don't sneeze. Quirky religious belief alert. In some provinces, it was believed that spirits could enter through your breath, so sneezing at the altar was seen as opening the door. A sneeze during prayer could mean bad crops, bad luck, or worse extra chores. You fall into bed exhausted. But sleep is never simple here. If you're studying for the exam, you probably dream of blank scrolls, ink stains, and floating disapproving ancestors. If you're not, you might dream of sneaking a peach tart from the market without anyone noticing. You don't, obviously. The market watchman can sense pastry crime through walls. Midnight. A rooster crows early. Somewhere, a bamboo flute drifts through the darkness. It's eerie and beautiful and probably a neighbor showing off, but for a moment you just lie there, listening, thinking, calculating. In Imperial China, you don't just survive, you navigate. Like a boat threading through bureaucracy, etiquette, and weather reports from your ancestors. And tomorrow might be the day a distant cousin gets chosen for the palace. Or the day your ink brush finally rebels and ruins your essay. Or the day the magistrate returns to check for smudges. Either way, you'll be ready. Or at least heavily caffeinated. Which, in this case, means sipping tea so bitter it could strip paint off a gate. You wake to the scratch of your neighbor's broom, sweeping the courtyard before sunrise. Imperial China believes in early starts and long lists, whether that's prayers, chores, or pages of the Analects. You sit up slowly on your mat, your joints crackling like thin ice, and look out the window. The mist is thick, curling through the alleyways like it's hunting for excuses. Breakfast isn't eggs and toast. It's a bowl of thin rice porridge congee, sometimes flavored with pickled vegetables if you're lucky, or a salted duck egg if you're royalty. Or at least pretending. You eat quickly. Meals aren't events here, they're fuel stops. You've got a dozen tasks before the sun's even halfway up. The chickens need to be checked, the water drawn from the well, and your grandmother insists that the ancestors need incense even if your stomach hasn't gotten a grain of rice yet. You don't argue. No one argues with Grandma Jang. Her glare is Confucian law. You shuffle out toward the communal well, bucket in hand, when a commotion ahead catches your ear, someone shouting about taxes. Again, it's always taxes. The man's voice is sharp, desperate. He claims the collector's taken too much. The collector, unimpressed, taps the tally board and reminds him he's lucky not to be fined double for back grain. Mainstream historical fact. In Imperial China, taxes were paid not in coins, but in goods, usually rice or grain. Each household's quota was measured by region and status. Failure to meet the quota could mean punishment, conscription, or the dreaded relocation to less desirable lands. You slip past, head down. Tax arguments are like street fires, don't get too close, or you'll end up cooked. But it stays with you. The taxes, the quotas, the way your neighbor's voice cracked when he mentioned feeding his children. In this empire, one missed harvest means the difference between peasant and prisoner. You think briefly of the Emperor, Son of Heaven, living behind gilded walls in the Forbidden City. He probably hasn't seen a grain ledger in years. Then again, he's got eunuchs, concubines, scholars, astrologers, and enough court intrigue to power a soap opera. You've got blisters and a bowl of porridge. You return home to find your aunt scrubbing the walls with vinegar and bamboo leaves. Why? Because your cousin coughed 3 times in a row and she's convinced the family's been hexed. Quirky tidbit. Superstitions ran deep in imperial households. It wasn't uncommon to ward off illness with charms made from ground up jade, paper talismans soaked in chicken, blood, or herbal baths prepared during very specific lunar phases. One record details a mother boiling her own hair into tea to ward off demons. Yes, hair tea. Still, you can't help but respect how tightly your world holds itself together with rituals, stories, and sheer endurance. There's a purpose behind everything, even if it's not always obvious or scientifically sound. The afternoon draws on. You're sent with a note to the local yamen or administrative office. You don't know what's in the notate, sealed, tied with red twine, stamped with your grandfather's chop. All you know is that delivering a note here feels like entering a dragon's mouth with a polite cough. The yamen gate is tall, red, and unnervingly silent. You step through and feel about 10 eyes land on you. A clerk looks up, yawns, takes the note, and waves you off like you're a puff of incense smoke. Transaction complete. You didn't faint. You're proud. But before you leave, your curiosity gets the better of you. You glance through the side door and catch a glimpse of a courtroom, bamboo canes, bound prisoners, an official reading from a scroll. A man kneels on the ground, head bowed, his shoulders trembling. You're not supposed to watch, but you can't look away. Historians still argue whether the legal system was as merciless as it seemed, or whether its rituals were more about deterrence than actual punishment. What's clear is that confession was prized, and suspects were often encouraged to confess via what you might call motivational wax with a stick. You slip away before someone notices. The image of the trembling man follows you home like a bad smell. As the sun lowers, you head toward the evening market. This is the only time the streets feel alive in a different way, children. Running, vendors shouting, music plucking out of nowhere. You pass a stall selling candied hawthorn skewers. You buy one. It's sour, sweet, and sticky, like a bribe you give your taste buds. You stop at the fortune teller's stall. A monkey in a vest tries to grab your sleeve. The old woman beside him beckons with a crooked finger and a grin that suggests she already knows what you're about to ask. Love? She rasps. Career? Travel? You laugh and say none. She draws a red card from her wooden box, hands it over without looking. This life is the roof beam, it reads, but beware the rotting support. You smile politely. You have no idea what that means, but it sounds bad enough to be accurate. As night falls, lanterns flicker to life, painting the alleyways in soft reds and golds. You breathe in the scent of ginger and charcoal. The world feels older, gentler for a moment. Then a loud crash from the fishmonger's stall ruins it. Apparently someone mistook a live eel for a vegetable. Again, at home, your grandfather's already deep into storytelling mode, recounting tales of bandits, dragons, and a tea kettle possessed by a vengeful scholar. You pretend to listen while quietly brushing your robes and checking your hands for ink stains. There's always tomorrow's lesson to consider. You go to bed thinking not just about what you learned, but what you survived. The taxes, the rituals, the glances from officials, the vinegar fumes, the monkey with unusually sharp fingers. Imperial China doesn't just want obedience. It wants alertness, attention, respect. You drift off slowly, wrapped in the smell of wood smoke and scroll paper, dreams twitching like puppet strings in a world ruled by order and dust. Your dreams are full of drums again. Not war drums, exactly more like those stately, deliberate beats you hear during temple processions or when an imperial edict is about to be read aloud. Which, come to think of it, is probably worse. You wake up slightly sweaty, one eye still closed, trying to remember if you paid respects yesterday or just thought about doing it. Morning arrives with a thunderclap of chores. Today's your turn to help at the dye shop. Yes, the dye shop. It sounds fancy. It is not. You trudge through alleys barely wide enough for two chickens to pass side by side, past a boy chasing a kite made from bamboo ribs and oiled paper, toward the thick, oddly sweet-smelling shack near the canal. Inside, steam hangs like a bad omen. Clay vats bubble with indigo and madder. Your uncle greets you by handing over a ladle that looks like it's been through 3 dynasties. Don't spill, he says cheerfully. This red is more expensive than your face. Mainstream historical fact. In Imperial China, natural dyes were labor-intensive and highly valuable. The most prized were reds from madder root, yellows from gardenia pods, and deep blacks made from iron oxide mixtures. Silk and cotton had to be boiled, beaten, soaked, and re-dyed, sometimes up to 10 times before the color was considered pure. You stir and stir and stir. Dyeing cloth is a lot like being punished slowly by soup, and the fumes, somewhere between fermented tea and regret. But there's a rhythm to it. You catch yourself humming, then coughing, then humming again, more carefully this time. An older woman walks in, eyes you, and mutters something about wasting the cinnabar. You double check your vat, still red, hopefully red. Unless she meant metaphorically, in which case who knows. Later, your uncle lets you step outside to hang the finished bolts of cloth. You walk past rows of colorsome bleached yellows, daring purples, arrogant blacks. The wind catches them, making the fabrics dance like ghosts mid-gossip. You imagine you're in a poem, briefly. Then a pigeon lands on the silk and you remember, this is real life and pigeons ruin everything. Back at home, lunch is millet with stir-fried greens. You barely sit before your aunt is talking about foot binding again, how your cousin's feet are coming along nicely, which is a horrifying sentence on several levels. You glance at your cousin's face, it says absolutely nothing and everything all at once. Quirky tidbit. Foot binding, though often associated with later dynasties, did exist in parts of Imperial China by the Song era. The belief was that tiny, lotus-shaped feet were a symbol of refinement and beauty. Girls as young as 5 had their feet broken and tightly bound to fit the ideal. The smaller the foot, the better the marriage prospects. Also, the worse the walking. You can't look directly at her feet without feeling guilty. You change the subject. I think the magistrate liked my brushwork, you say. It's not a complete lie. Your grandmother mutters something about false pride and starts trimming the wick of the oil lamp like it personally offended her. In the afternoon, you're sent to the apothecary to pick up dried chrysanthemum and powdered deer antler. The shop is half pharmacy, half magical grotto. Shelves grown with jars filled with every imaginable ingredient. Snakeskins, star anise, centipedes, bear gallbladders, allegedly, and herbs that probably haven't been legal since the Zhou dynasty. Historians still argue whether traditional Chinese medicine during the empire was primarily superstition, science, or a strange but successful mix of both. Some formulas cured everything from headaches to heartbreaks. Others were more decorative than useful, and a few, like the 9 dragon pill, probably just made you high and confused but with great skin. The apothecary gives you your items in wax paper packets, tied with red string. You thank him, bow, and avoid eye contact with the jar labeled dried gecko for spleen energy. It stares back. Walking home, you pass a small troupe of performers setting up near the market square. A drum taps twice, a string instrument follows. A masked actor begins to leap, spinning his long sleeves like wind itself. The growing crowd claps in rhythm, opera, or at least the street version of it. A woman in a bright red tunic sings in that piercing nasal tone that makes your bones feel personally criticized. The lyrics are about a scholar who falls in love with a goddess, fails his exam, and then ascends to heaven through a well. Standard Tuesday plotline. You smile. It's a relief to watch someone else struggle fictionally for a change. Plus, the costumes are stunning, gold threads glinting, headdresses taller than the actors themselves. For a moment, you forget everything else. The dye fumes, the taxes, the bound feet. Then the drum thunders. Final pose. Bow. Applause. The crowd disperses like steam. You walk the rest of the way home in silence, the performance still flickering behind your eyes. Dinner is quiet. Rice, fish, pickled radish. Your grandfather recounts a tale about a ghost who couldn't reincarnate because someone forgot to burn the correct paper horse. Your sister groans. Your grandmother tells her to respect spirits or else the rice pot will crack again. Before bed, you light a stick of sandalwood incense. Not for prayer, just to clear the dye stench from your hair. Your cousin's already asleep, feet bundled, face turned to the wall. You lie down, watching shadows from the lantern dance across the ceiling beams. You wonder what it'd be like to leave, to walk to the next province, to see the Great Wall or the Yellow River, or even the Forbidden City. But that's not your path. Not yet. For now, your world is porcelain bowls, silk boats, red strings, ink strokes, pigeon accidents, and ghost stories about forgetful paper offerings. Tomorrow, you'll probably spill dye again, but tonight, you rest like someone who knows they tried. You wake up to the sound of bells, not the temple kind, but the sharp metallic clink of the neighborhood tofu seller making his morning rounds. It's barely dawn, and already the streets are muttering with motion. A rooster screams indignantly at a cartwheel. And somewhere nearby, someone sneezes 6 times in a row, probably a record. Today is market day. Not the quick corner pickup scallions version, but the full deal town gathering where you could buy everything from live ducks to poetry scrolls. You're excited, which is strange because you're not normally a fan of crowds or carts with questionable wheel stability. But market day means variety, color, sound, smells both divine and suspicious. You tuck your coin pouch under your robe, adjust your sleeves to look slightly more impressive, and join the slow-moving human river down the stone path toward the central square. On the way, you pass a group of scholars debating loudly in front of a tea house. You catch a few phrases, something about the correct order of filial piety responsibilities, and also something about someone's mother-in-law being a tyrant in embroidered shoes. You speed up. Mainstream historical fact. Imperial China's marketplaces were not just for trade. They were hubs of gossip, politics, matchmaking, and entertainment. Local magistrates often walked among the stalls to keep order or deliver impromptu judgments. Market days were one of the few sanctioned breaks in the otherwise orderly rhythm of daily life. The square unfolds like a painting. Stalls bulge with bamboo steamers, stacks of pottery, baskets of ginger, coils of incense. A man waves grilled octopus skewers like tiny edible swords. Another balances 2 squawking chickens across his shoulders, looking entirely unbothered by the chaos they're causing. A girl sells paper kites in the shape of phoenixes. One breaks free and soars over the rooftops like it's late for a celestial appointment. You stop at a booth stacked with lacquered hairpins. A merchant with no visible eyebrows eyes you carefully. You have the look of someone with at least one secret, he says, handing you a jade-colored one. You laugh. He doesn't. You buy it. Further down, a storyteller has gathered a crowd. He's young, voice strong, robe slightly too clean for someone working this hard. He stands on a wooden crate, holding a fan, and spins a tale about a general who disguised himself as a dancing girl to steal enemy plans. There's laughter, gasps, clapping. You lean in. Quirky tidbit. It wasn't unusual for storytellers to invent wildly fictionalized versions of current events, passing them off as ancient lessons. This loophole let them comment on local politics without getting arrested usually. Some even became celebrities, traveling from province to province, earning coin and occasional marriage proposals. You drop a copper coin into the storyteller's bowl, and he winks. You feel like a patron of the arts. For 1.5 seconds. From the corner of your eye, you spot something odd, a man selling what appears to be tiny bottles of powdered pearl. Teeth whitener, he claims. Also good for heartbreak and horse breath. You shake your head and keep moving. You bump into someone hard. You look up and find yourself face to face with a monk holding a basket of turnips and wearing the expression of a man who's had too many existential thoughts today. He bows. You bow. There is an awkward pause. Then he mutters, "Turnips are heavier than sin," and walks off. You're still not sure if it was metaphor or complaint. You pick up some sesame cakes for your grandmother and a new ink brush for your cousin, who's been using one with more hair loss than wisdom. Then, drawn by the scent of something smoky and wonderful, you find yourself at a stall selling roast chestnuts. The vendor looks like he was born with soot on his hands. He gestures at the glowing coals like a magician. You buy a paper twist of the chestnuts and bite into one. It burns your tongue slightly, but it's sweet and earthy, like edible autumn. You sit on a stone step and take it all in the swirl of humanity, the scent of spice and rain-damp cloth, the music from a distant flute that seems to be arguing with itself. Then something shifts. The crowd parts suddenly. Whispers ripple outward like dropped pebbles. A mounted figure, a Pearson Imperial inspector in crisp robes, flanked by guards. His presence is like a winter wind cleansing, cold and guaranteed to uncover your mistakes. He doesn't stop, just rides through slowly, eyes scanning everything, everyone. Your chest tightens just a bit, but he's gone in a moment, and the market breathes again. Historians still argue whether these traveling inspectors were truly effective or just ceremonial. Some claim they rooted out corruption and upheld justice. Others argue their appearances were more performative than practical a show of imperial reach in a land too vast for full control. You finish your chestnuts and decide to leave before the next surprise arrives. On the way back, you take a shortcut through a narrow alley you've never used before. It's quiet, save for the rustle of laundry and the distant clatter of chopsticks. A small shrine sits in the crook of a wall tiny. Hidden, cared for, incense sticks, orange slices, and what looks like a folded poem sit inside. You pause, bow slightly, and feel a strange warmth settle over your shoulders. No one's watching. It just feels right. You reach home and unload your treasures. Your grandmother sniffs the sesame cakes and nods. Your cousin gasps at the new brush and promptly begins to write an overly formal thank you note that includes a Confucian quote and a drawing of a confused tiger. Evening falls. Lanterns flicker. Your uncle talks politics. Your aunt gossips about someone's duck escaping into a brothel. You just sit and smile, full of stories and roasted chestnut. You drift to sleep later with the image of a kite still floating in your mind, its tail dancing against the stars. Tomorrow, who knows what you'll stumble into. Your dreams that night are strange something about a fish giving legal advice to a carp dressed as an imperial official. It makes more sense than you'd like to admit. You wake up vaguely anxious and also craving radish. Outside, the morning is thick with mist and low bird chatter. The street feels suspended in time, like someone hit pause on the entire empire. But there's no pause button in Imperial China. Especially not for you. Today, you're being sent to the weaving hall. Not as a treat, as punishment. Apparently, your cousin told your aunt you said her new embroidered shoes look like angry dumplings. You maintain that you said bold dumplings. Important difference. You trudge across town, hands in sleeves, dodging chickens, and a man carrying 4 buckets on a shoulder pole like he's in some kind of low-budget balancing act. The weaving hall looms a headlong, low, and humming with a tension you can already feel in your teeth. Inside, dozens of women sit at looms the size of bed frames, feet tapping, fingers flying. Threads twist and cross, click-clacking in mechanical rhythm. It's like music made by ghosts with excellent posture. You're handed a spindle and shown a stool. Your job, thread bobbins and don't ruin everything. Mainstream historical fact. Weaving was a major domestic industry in Imperial China. Skilled weavers, often women, produced everything from humble cotton to elaborate brocades destined for the court. The quality of one's weaving could determine marriage prospects, family prestige, and economic stability. Weavers followed complex patterns from memory, and some halls enforced silence so rhythms wouldn't be disturbed. The silence, though, is anything but peaceful. It's loud with glances, coughs, foot taps. You fumble your first bobbin and are immediately judged by someone who hasn't blinked in 3 minutes. Eventually, you find a rhythm. Left hand feeds, right hand spins. The spindle hums like a bored cricket. You almost forget the insult to shoes debacle. Almost. Nearby, an older woman tells you that the thread must be taught how to behave, which sounds poetic until you realize she's serious. She taps your hand, adjusts your posture, and mutters that even thread can sense weakness. You ask a bold question during break. Have you ever made cloth for the palace? She pauses. Her eyes crinkle. Once, she says, I made a robe sleeve for a concubine. She died before she could wear it. You're not sure if she's bragging or warning you. Quirky tidbit. Some court tailors believed garments could absorb the spirit of their wearers. This led to strange customs like refusing to finish an outfit too far in advance for fear the wearer might die before donning it, especially true for children or the elderly. Lunchtime arrives with a thick bowl of noodle broth and the deeply communal act of gossip disguised as polite murmuring. Someone mentions the tax collector's daughter is pregnant suspiciously early. Another claims a scholar was caught weeping over a broken inkstone. You slurp quietly, hoping no one circles back to dumpling shoes. After the meal, you're sent on an Aranto, deliver a bolt of finished silk to a visiting official's retinue. You carry it carefully, like it might explode. The silk is pale gold, almost glowing, and wrapped like a newborn deity. You arrive at the guest quarters, bow deeply, and hand over the fabric. A tall woman inspects it without looking at you, says nothing, and disappears into a room that smells faintly of cinnamon and old power. A guard nods at you to leave. You do. Back outside, you breathe a sigh of relief. And maybe, just maybe, feel a flicker of pride. You didn't drop it. You didn't trip. You are, briefly, a trustworthy person. On your way back, you stop by the ink shop. Not because you need ink, because the apprentice there always smells like pine resin and secretly draws cartoons of government officials with giant noses. You ask for red ink. He hands it over and slides you a folded square of parchment. A doodle of your grandmother wielding a soup ladle like a sword. You laugh so hard you almost drop the ink bottle. He winks. Art is dangerous, he says, but only when it's good. Historians still argue whether political cartoons and satire were common in underground literature or if most of what survives was made long after the fact. Some believe court scribes produced parody scrolls for their own amusement, which were later copied and circulated in secret. You return home late. Your grandmother scolds you for forgetting the dried plums. Your cousin thanks you again for the ink brush and shows you a poem she wrote about a crane with commitment issues. You pretend to understand it deeply. That night, you help your aunt untangle a skein of thread. She says nothing about the dumpling shoes but offers you a sticky rice cake, which is her version of forgiveness. You accept it like a peace treaty. You go to bed with sore fingers and the faint scent of pine resin still lingering in your sleeves. Outside, rain begins to patter gently on the tiled roof, turning the courtyard lanterns into smeared orange halos. In your dreams, the looms return, but this time, they're weaving clouds, and every thread sings your name in perfect harmony. You're up before the sun, mostly because someone dropped a ceramic bowl in the courtyard and the resulting shout was loud enough to wake the ancestors. You shuffle out, eyes barely open, to find your uncle crouched over shards, muttering, "That bowl was older than you." You say nothing and step around him like he's a museum exhibit labeled Grumbling Patriarch. Today you're expected at the local schoolhouse. No, you're not a student. You're there to help your cousin deliver a basket of pickled radishes to her tutor. Apparently, he saved her from accidentally citing a poem backward in front of an exam official, which would have been embarrassing on a spiritual level. You sling the basket over your arm and head out. The streets are still sleepy, and the smell of early morning rice porridge clings to the walls. A cat stretches across a threshold, like it owns both time and property rights. The schoolhouse is tucked between a temple and a plum orchard. Its modest wooden beams, faded calligraphy on hanging scrolls, and a bamboo fence that looks like it's given up hope. Inside, students are reciting passages in a rolling wave of sound, like an academic thunderstorm. You deliver the radish basket with a bow. The tutor, a man whose eyebrows deserve their own lunar calendar, nods solemnly and hands you a riddle in return. Solve it by sunset, he says. Or the radishes lose their blessing. You blink. He's already walking away. You make a mental note to look up radish curses. Mainstream historical fact. Education in Imperial China was deeply tied to the civil service exam system. Success in these exams meant potential entrance into bureaucracy known of the few ways to rise in status. But studying was brutal, memorizing thousands of characters, mastering Confucian texts, and producing essays that followed rigid formats. Schoolmasters were respected and feared. On your way out, You pass a student weeping softly into a scroll. His classmate pats his back and mutters, "He missed a stroke in the character for virtue, again." You leave quickly, not wanting to catch whatever academic despair is airborne in here. At the tea stall near the orchard, you sit and order chrysanthemum tea. The old vendor refills your cup 3 times before saying, "You look like someone carrying a question." You explain the riddle. He nods once and pours more tea. No help, just tea. Apparently some things must be solved alone or with caffeine. Quirky tidbit. Some scholars, desperate to succeed in the exams, would write characters on their walls, repeat poems in their sleep, or even tattoo formulas on their arms. There's an unconfirmed rumor of a student who trained a minor bird to recite Confucian classics in case he forgot under pressure. You walk home slowly, the riddle echoing in your brain like an annoying flute player in a narrow hallway. Your grandmother intercepts you with a broom, declares your posture emotionally concerning, and sends you off to help in the kitchen. There, your aunt is preparing dumplings again. "Today they will be shaped like coins," she says, "for luck." You wonder if you're expected to eat 12 of them again like last time. Probably. You roll dough, stuff, fillings, pinch edges. It's oddly soothing, and by the 7th dumpling, you think you might have cracked the riddle. Something about balance, about opposites. You tell your aunt. She blinks, shrugs, and says, "Tell the tutor, I just want the radishes back blessed." That night, you return to the schoolhouse. The tutor is sweeping the porch with a broom older than the dynasty itself. You recite your answer. He grunts approvingly and tosses you a preserved plum. Your mind is like a noodle, flexible, occasional knots. You thank him, unsure if you've been complimented or cooked. As you walk away, you notice a scroll pinned beside the school's doorway. A quote. "Books are the voice of ancestors speaking through silence." You pause, read it twice, smile. Back home, your cousin beams at her radishes. "Still pickled," she says, "but now spiritually aligned." You tell her about the plum, the noodle brain, and the scholar with the virtue problem. She laughs and says, "You'll never pass the exam, but you'd be a great story character." You help her light the lanterns for evening study. As the room fills with the soft glow of flame on paper, she recites lines from a classic poem. You correct her tone halfway through. She throws a pillow at you. Historians still argue whether commoners truly value education for its own sake or mostly pursue learning for potential social mobility. Some suggest the idea of education for enlightenment was more idealized in later centuries than practiced by the masses. Later, lying on the rooftop under the stars, you try to remember how many dumplings you ate. 6, 8, the moon is a perfect coin tonight round, silver and a little smug. You close your eyes, letting the sound of night crickets, distant flute music, and someone being scolded for burning conjure you into sleep. In your dream, you're seated at the Imperial exam hall. Your brush moves like wind, your scroll glows. The examiner is a fish wearing spectacles. You don't question it. You bow. She does not bow back. She examines your apricots like they owe her rent. Then she sniffs and says, "Too small, passable, perhaps," and moves on. You feel like you've survived a tiger that politely declined to bite you. Mainstream historical fact. In Imperial China, markets weren't just about buying goods. They were places where social classes intersected. While officials and nobility had servants do the buying, high-ranking women often visited markets as a form of controlled public appearance. Their status could influence the price of goods just by proximity. After she's gone, the fruit vendor whispers, "She once made a butcher cry just by raising one eyebrow." You nod. You believe it. With the pressure off, you're allowed to browse. You inspect jade hairpins you'll never afford, taste a rice cake dipped in honey, and against better judgment buy a painted fan with a tiny rabbit on it. You tell yourself it's for your aunt, but you keep it in your sleeve. As you wander, you pass a stall with strange instruments. glass spheres, polished stones, a scale that seems too delicate for anything real. The man behind it says he's a balance whisperer. You ask him what that means. He leans in and says nothing, but it sells more scales. You buy a tiny one anyway. Quirky tidbit. Some vendors in ancient markets use nonsensical titles to draw attention. Cloudweight Merchant, Harmony Lens Specialist, and Spice Tamer were real self-designations, especially in cities trying to seem more cosmopolitan. You stop at a storytelling booth, drawn by the dramatic voice of a man who sounds like he's narrating an epic even when asking for water. He's midway through a tale of a ghost who haunts a wedding dress. His assistant mimes the entire story with exaggerated hand gestures and a paper mask. You are spellbound. When the story ends, a small crowd tosses coins into a lacquered bowl. You contribute a plum, which earns you a nod. He calls you the generous peach spirit. You decide that's now your market name. Historians still argue whether public storytellers exaggerated tales for performance or preserved oral history with surprising accuracy. Some believe their influence on folk memory shaped how dynasties were remembered far more than official records. Heading home, you feel weirdly proud. You didn't insult the official's wife. You found a fan. You earned a new name. It's a good day. Back at the house, your grandmother inspects you like you're a forged vase. No bruises, no bad luck followed you home? Fine, eat. She hands you a warm sesame bun. At dinner, you tell the family about the storytelling ghost, the crying butcher, and the talking pigeon. Your uncle claims he once knew a goose that quoted poetry. No one believes him. He doesn't mind. Your cousin steals your fan. You chase her. She waves it dramatically and declares herself Rabbit Empress of the South. You counter with Peach Spirit of the North. Your grandmother rolls her eyes. Your aunt laughs until she snorts tea. That night, after everyone's asleep, you tiptoe to the courtyard. The moon is high and the lanterns sway like they're dreaming. You open the tiny balance scale and set a pebble on each side. Perfectly level. You whisper, Harmony Lens Specialist, just to hear it in the quiet. Then, from the shadows, a low voice, Cloudweight Merchant. You jump. It's your uncle, sitting with a bowl of melon seeds and zero shame. I heard the ghost story too, he says. Terrible miming, very good twist. You sit beside him. He passes you some seeds. Neither of you speaks for a while. Just the sound of the night, and tiny shells hitting the ground like lazy rain. Eventually he says, you did well today, even if your posture still insults heaven. You smile. You'll take it. The next morning begins with a surprise inspection. Not of the house, of you. Your grandmother wakes you with a flick to the forehead and the words, today you represent this family. You blink, then groan, then ask, represent where exactly? She hands you a folded robe and answers, the market. The official's wife will be there. Wear this, try not to speak. You've heard of the official's wife. Everyone has. She once returned a gift of pearls because the luster was nervous. She once told a storyteller to speak less like a frog. This is not the kind of person you want to accidentally offend by, say, existing in the wrong direction. The robe you're given smells like sandalwood and expectations. You tie the sash too tight out of panic, then untie it, then retie it worse. Eventually, your cousin fixes it with one motion and smirks. You'll do, from a distance, with poor lighting. At the market, everything smells like spice and bargaining. Vendors shout, chickens panic, children sneak sweets, and a man is trying to sell a pigeon that definitely knows 7 words. You try not to look suspicious while carrying a basket of apricots. Then she appears, the official's wife, gliding, not walking, hair like calligraphy, expression like she's constantly reevaluating your worth and coming up with coupons. The rooster is yelling again. You suspect he's doing it on purpose now, like some feathery alarm clock with a personal vendetta. You groan, throw a sandal in his general direction, it misses by a poetic margin, and drag yourself upright. Today's excitement? An imperial tax collector is visiting the village. You can tell by the way your household is pretending not to panic. Your grandmother is polishing the family tablet like it contains stock options. Your uncle is counting rice jars, twice. Your cousin is trying to iron creases out of your tunic using a hot stone in sheer frustration. You're not sure why you have to be present. Face diversity, your aunt says. We need at least one person who looks like they've never broken a rule. You practice your most innocent expression in the mirror. It comes out more, I definitely hid something under the floorboards. You try again. The courtyard is full of tension and broom activity. Neighbors are sweeping invisible dust, adjusting furniture angles, and muttering Confucian quotes under their breath like protective spells. You hear one say, "We must appear orderly but humble. Too clean looks suspicious." Another whispers, "Offer tea, not snacks. Snacks say you're hiding gold." Mainstream historical fact. Imperial tax collectors were agents of both awe and dread, often representing regional magistrates or directly appointed by the central court. Their arrival could mean anything from land reassessment to surprise levies. They wielded significant power and often exploited it. When the collector arrives, he's wearing layers of silk and the face of a man who hasn't been impressed since the previous dynasty. His assistant trails behind with an ink slab and that haunted look of someone who once spilled it on an official document and never recovered emotionally. They don't say much. They look at your shoes, your roof tiles, the calligraphy above the shrine. You're asked to recite your family's generation poem. You Dunarly backwards. Your grandmother winces. The assistant scribbles. You sweat. Then, a cough. A request for tea. The signal. You rush to prepare it. The water must be hot but not angry. The leaves must be generous but not boastful. The cup must be placed on the tray with two hands, not like you're handing over a bribe, but like you're offering calm in a cup. He drinks, nods. His assistant writes, acceptable civility. You feel like you've passed a test you didn't study for. Quirky tidbit. Some communities prepared for inspections by hiring out decorative relatives, distant cousins with poetic handwriting, or unusually good posturato stand around and create an aura of dignity. One village reportedly rented a retired scholar just to sit on the porch and look wise. The collector asks about your grain output. Your uncle steps in. Numbers fly. Units of measurement so old they feel fictional. 5 dough per mu, he says. The collector frowns. Dry dough or wet? Your uncle hesitates. You consider faking a fainting spell. Then your cousin pipes up. Our irrigation flow is steady from the northern canal, sir. The assistant scribbles. The collector seems satisfied. You breathe again. Historians still argue whether village tax data was frequently inflated, deflated, or both, depending on who was recording it and who was watching. Some scholars suggest local families developed complex codes to obscure true yield, while others argue most tax collectors just guessed based on house size and shoe quality. After the visit, there is a communal exhale. Your grandmother declares that even the dust is now allowed to return. Someone lights incense. Your cousin reenacts your shaky tea delivery using a rice bowl and a tragic expression. That night, the village throws a small feast not to celebrate the tax collector leaving, of course. Just, a spontaneous gathering of gratitude for community and rice not being confiscated. There's fish steamed in ginger, pickled mustard greens, taro fried in oil, and bean cakes that are somehow both rock hard and delicious. You eat too much, you say too little. You float home on a wave of fullness and relief. Back in the house, your aunt gives you a quiet nod of approval. Your uncle mutters, should have worn my good tunic. Your grandmother says, he didn't faint. We count this as a win. Later, you find your cousin on the roof, unbraiding her hair under the stars. You sit beside her. She says, "I thought he'd take our roof tiles. They look too symmetrical." You laugh. She adds, "But your tea saved us." You both stare at the moon, round and a bit smug again, like it knows things you don't. Maybe it does. You take out the tiny balance scale and place a sesame seed on each side. They tilt. "Unbalanced," you murmur. "Like our tax system," your cousin whispers. You both laugh harder than you should. Mainstream historical fact. The Double Seventh Festival, or Qixi, has been celebrated since the Han Dynasty. It began as a day for young women to demonstrate domestic skills needlework competitions, poetry, recitals, and sometimes melon carving. Yes, melon carving. Because nothing says true love like a fruit sculpture. At midday, you're assigned the classic teen task. Deliver items from the family stall to the matchmaking booth. You carry baskets filled with ribbon charms, prayer fans, and a jar of love knots made from red string. You walk like you're transporting sacred relics, which you sort of are. The booth is surrounded by hopefuls. Some drop their names into a lacquered box. Others stare longingly at the calligraphed fates hanging nearby. One man loudly insists he was born under the star of romantic victory. His friend mutters, "More like the star of clinginess." You spot a familiar face, your neighbor from 3 rooftops down, known for his flute playing and his absolutely terrible haircut. He catches your eye and smiles. You pretend you're very busy with your knot jar. Quirky tidbit. During some Qixi festivals, people believed you could ask the stars for relationship advice by throwing paper charms into a river. If it floated gracefully, your wish was approved. If it sank or got eaten by a duck well, maybe love wasn't in the cards this year. Your cousin hands you a folded note. "Secret admirer letter," she says, smirking. You unfold it. Inside, a terrible drawing of a goose with hearts around it. You glance toward the matchmaking booth. Flute guy waves. You sigh. The afternoon winds down with performances. There's a puppet play where one puppet dramatically faints into a bowl of rice. A girl sings a song about longing so intense it makes someone in the audience cry into their noodle bowl. You pretend not to notice your cousin wiping her eyes. Historians still argue whether the Weaver Girl story inspired Qixi or if the festival came first and the tale was retrofitted onto it. Some even suggest the Magpie Bridge element was added centuries later to sweeten the bitterness of the star-crossed narrative. Nothing like some bird labor to make a tragedy feel festive. That evening, everyone heads to the river. You carry your family's offerings, lotus-shaped lanterns, tiny bowls of sweet wine, and rice wrapped in fragrant leaves. Each item has a meaning. Each movement has a purpose. Or so your grandmother says. You kneel by the bank and set a lantern afloat. It drifts, catches light from another, and you watch as the whole river becomes a trembling golden snake of wishes. People start clapping. Somewhere, a zither plucks out the tune of the Weaver Girl's lament. You think about what it must be like to love once a year and wait the rest of the time. You also think, what if they had a fight that day? Back home, the air is thick with the scent of incense and leftovers. Everyone's tired in a good way. The kind that makes your bones feel well earned. Your cousin finds you on the steps, still holding the goose drawing. She says, "So? Gonna keep it?" You say, "It's not terrible." She gasps. That's basically a proposal. You both laugh. You fold the note and tuck it into your sleeve. Just for now. Later, you sit in the courtyard. The moon looks like it's trying very hard to be romantic. A cricket chirps like it's auditioning for a background role in your feelings. You smile anyway. You pull out your tiny scale, 1 apricot seed on each side, perfect balance. The festival banners go up before the sun does. You wake to the clatter of ladders, the smell of fresh ink, and a neighbor yelling, "Left, your other left," as someone nearly hangs a red scroll upside down. This is how you know it's the 7th day of the 7th moon, the Double Seventh Festival, known to romantics and laundry day philosophers as Chinese Valentines. Today is when you celebrate a tale of cosmic inconvenience. A cowherd and a weaver girl, lovers separated by a jealous heaven, allowed to meet once a year on a bridge of magpies. You can practically hear the magpies negotiating overtime pay. Hey guys, tonight Winnipeg, wrong section, force of habit. You're in charge of helping decorate the family stall at the festival grounds. It's mostly ribbons, poem scrolls, and paper lanterns that somehow always want to collapse into triangles. Your cousin is in charge of aesthetic decisions, which seems to mean shouting, "Too pink," every 5 minutes. As you hang a cluster of paper lotuses, a breeze kicks up and sends them spiraling into a nearby dumpling stall. You retrieve them while apologizing to a man whose face suggests he just witnessed a crime against symmetry. He is not impressed. The dumpling steam hits your face like a cloud of warm guilt. The scent of ink and damp bamboo hits your nose before you even open your eyes. Today is exam day, not yours, thank the stars, but your cousin's pre-6. And in Imperial China, that's a bit like saying today's the day someone volunteers to wrestle a bureaucratic dragon using only a writing brush and the contents of their brain. You're on snack duty. She's on destiny. You trudge into the courtyard with a basket of tea cakes and ginger candies. Your cousin sits beneath a plum tree, repeating Confucian quotes to herself with the intensity of someone disarming a bomb. She hasn't blinked since sunrise. A sparrow lands nearby and then quickly reconsiders. "Did you remember the inkstone?" she asks. You nod. "2 brushes?" Nod again. "Hairpin for scratching sudden itches?" You hesitate. She groans. "Hey guys, tonight, we know." No, not that voice. Not now. Mainstream historical fact, the Imperial Examination System, or Keiju, was the primary route to becoming a government official in China for over 1,000 years. It was one of the earliest merit-based systems in the world, at least. In theory, and tested candidates on Confucian texts, moral judgment, poetry, and even policy writing. Passing was like winning a mental Olympics. Failing was common. Your cousin's exam is local level, held at a temporary pavilion surrounded by bamboo scaffolding and an alarming number of roosters. Every candidate has their own booth, a narrow plank to sit on, another to write on, and walls thin enough to hear your neighbor have a full panic attack. You help carry her scrolls. She hands you her lucky cabbage charm, which you're not sure works, but you don't say anything. She steps into her exam cubicle like a warrior into a very cramped arena. You return to the waiting area. Parents, siblings, tutors everyone's here with food, prayers, and opinions. One man paces while muttering, "Did I bribe the right proctor?" Another's playing a flute so loudly someone throws a dumpling at him. Direct hit. Quirky tidbit. During the Tang Dynasty, some candidates wrote secret poems in invisible ink on their Slevestini cheats, in a system supposedly immune to favoritism. One man allegedly wore a hat lined with notes. He was caught when he sneezed Confucian wisdom. The hours crawl. You watch birds, count tiles, and worry that your cousin forgot how to spell virtue. You try to nap, but someone starts crying near the melon cart. Apparently their son's essay devolved into a rant about tofu taxes. Historians still argue whether the Keiju system truly promoted social mobility. Some say it allowed brilliant minds from humble backgrounds to rise. Others argue it favored families wealthy enough to fund years of study, tutors, and the occasional well-placed tea set. At dusk, the candidates emerge. Some look relieved, some look haunted. Your cousin looks tired. She stumbles into your arms and mutters, "I may have compared loyalty to a steamed bun. Is that metaphor legal?" You hand her a cake. You wrote something. That's already a miracle. You walk her home through lantern-lit streets. She recounts the essay prompts, one on filial piety, another on tax grain reform, and a third that simply read, "What is harmony?" You both agreed it was a trap. At home, your grandmother throws a mild feast. Not a celebratory one, just enough to signal that effort is worthy of rice dumplings. There's congee, pork soaked in wine, and a tofu dish so soft it might be trying to apologize for existing. Later that night, your cousin opens her sleeve and pulls out a scribbled backup outline. Didn't even need it, she whispers, proud and sleep deprived. You raise your teacup. She clinks it with hers. To the great equalizer, extreme stress. You find your cousin's balance scale. She's still too shaky to use it. You place a dried plum on one side, a smooth stone on the other. They wobble, then settle. Not perfect, but close. Like your metaphor, you murmur. Fun loyalty. Outside, the moon is only a sliver tonight, like it's peeking at the results before you can. He begins with names. Your grandmother launches into a 30-minute genealogy that includes a cousin who may have fought a tiger, though this remains unverified. You sneak him a sugared plum. He moves on. When asked about your household's income, your uncle suddenly gets poetic. We are humble people. The wind brings our fortune. The river hums our worth. The scribe replies, so, 2 bolts of silk and a goat? Historians still argue whether the accuracy of these records truly matter to the central government. Some scholars believe emperors used census data to plan infrastructure and conscription. Others suspect local officials fudged the numbers just enough to avoid both rebellion and paperwork. Later, the scribe inspects your fields. You accompany him through rows of not quite ripe barley while pretending the weeds are intentional. Biodiversity, you say. He nods like he totally buys it. A frog croaks loudly, possibly judging you. Back at the house, he logs your tools, yes, even broken ones, and makes a note about the excellent chicken enclosure, which is generous because the chickens share it with a very bold rat. As he leaves, he mumbles, next household, whittle Wei and her 6 geese. You pray for the man. The moment he's out of sight, everyone exhales. Your cousin slumps into a chair and says, we should celebrate not being fined. Your grandmother adds, and for my miraculous 58th birthday. You bring out some leftover dumplings, and your uncle offers a toast with watered-down rice wine. Evening rolls in with its usual mix of smoke, fireflies, and someone's flute practice from 2 houses down. Your cousin shows you the census stub, the little slip, proving you were counted, taxed, and not found suspicious. This, apparently, is cause for joy. You glance at the family balance scale. Your grandmother left a sugared plum on one side. You drop your census stub on the other. They tilt, then balance. Kind of. May bureaucracy always tip in our favor, you whisper. Outside, the moon is a little fatter than last night. A census of light, inching forward, measuring nothing but still recording everything. You wait till the shrill sound of a gong. Not a ceremonial one, not even a breakfast one. This is the kind of gong that announces, something terrible has happened, and no, you don't get to finish your dumpling. You fling open the shutter. Your neighbor's goat is loose again, but that's not the disaster. A government crier stands at the crossroads, waving a scroll like it owes him money. Imperial census begins today, he yells. All households prepare. You groan. The census isn't just someone jotting down who lives where. It's an epic scroll-filling ritual that involves tax calculations, labor obligations, ancestral names, and somehow an interrogation about how many jars of millet you go through in a season. Spoiler, it's always too many. Get the ink brush, your grandmother says, and the bribe candy. You blink. The what? She taps the box of sugared plums. For the scribe, in case he forgets how old I am. Mainstream historical fact. Censuses in Imperial China were conducted for both population tracking and taxation. The Tang dynasty had one of the most organized early systems, with households registered in detailed books called hukou. These records tracked birth, death, migration, and your general usefulness to the empire. Missing data? That could mean more taxes, conscription, or worse on, uninvited lecture. Your household scrambles into performance mode. Your uncle combs his beard for the first time in months. Your cousin tries to forge neat handwriting on a scroll that already looks like it's been through emotional trauma. Your grandmother insists she's 58. You're pretty sure she's been 58 for the past 10 years. Quirky tidbit. Some people in rural areas dodged census visits by pretending to be dead, hiding in cupboards, or even dressing up as visiting monks. One legend tells of a family that buried their rice jars and slept in the barn for a week, claiming their house had been taken over by ghosts. The official wrote, "Haunted, no taxes." The scribe arrives just before lunch, swaddled in ink stains and self-importance. He pulls out a bamboo-bound book thick enough to stun an ox. You offer him tea. He says, "Only if it's from this year's harvest." You lie and say yes. It's from 2 winters ago and tastes like regret. The sharp scent of lacquer and peach blossom fills your nose before your eyes even open. Something is different today. Cleaner, more polished, and suspiciously performative. Your courtyard has been swept within an inch of its life. Red banners flap over the gate. Someone's dusting the family spirit tablet like it's going to give out merit points. You squint at your cousin, who is dressed as if she's about to marry the emperor, sue him. "What did I miss?" you mumble. She grins. "Matchmaker's coming." Ah, that explains everything, including why your grandmother is dressed in silk and your uncle smells like he actually used soap. Mainstream historical fact. In Imperial China, marriages weren't about love in the modern sense. They were contracts between family strategic alliances, brokered by matchmakers, Mei Ren, who considered age, fortune, zodiac signs, social class, and whether the bride's family had a history of weirdly short lifespans. Romantic feelings, optional and often developed sometime after the 5th baby. You're not the one being matched, thank every deity, but watching the ritual unfold is something between theater and hostage negotiation. The matchmaker arrives in a whirlwind of perfume and paper fans. Her face is painted with the precision of a calligraphy scroll, and her voice could coax secrets out of a stone wall. She opens a thick ledger with names, birthdays, and more diagrams than a feng shui manual. Your cousin presents her virtues: embroidery samples, calligraphy scrolls, and one impressively lifelike paper cut of a rabbit holding a lotus. You sneak behind her and whisper, "Where's your essay about loyalty buns?" She elbows you. Quirky tidbit. To test a bride's temperament, some matchmakers would spill a cup of tea on her gown, accidentally. A good-natured reaction, bonus points, rage, and flying chopsticks, the match might quietly vanish. The matchmaker asks about dowry always the elephant in the tea house. Your uncle lists it with ceremonial flair, silk boats, a bronze mirror, a pair of chickens renowned for their egg output, and an antique comb said to have belonged to a concubine of Emperor Xuanzang. You're pretty sure that's family legend, not fact, but hey, marketing. The matchmaker nods like a scholar grading essays, then flips through potential grooms. "Ah, this one," she says, tapping a profile. Second son of a salt merchant, slight overbite, can read, no documented curses. "Perfect," your grandmother whispers. "Everyone knows it's the second sons who try harder." Historians still argue whether marriage in Imperial China gave women any real agency. Some scholars point to arranged matches and restrictive expectations. Others highlight how some women skillfully maneuvered within those structures using wit, charm, and even poetry to influence their fates. You watch your cousin's face as the scroll is unfurled. She doesn't frown, she doesn't smile. She tilts her head, thinking. "Can he cook?" she finally asks. The matchmaker blinks. "He can afford someone who can." Your cousin replies. "Might be a deal breaker." Later that day, the formal tea exchange begins. Tiny porcelain cups pass between families as coded metaphors are exchanged. Tea too bitter? Relationship forecast. Stormy. Tea too sweet. Someone's hiding something. The blend chosen today is delicate, floral, and exactly lukewarm. Ambiguous, which is apparently the safest bet. The courtyard slowly clears. Your cousin sighs and removes a hairpin shaped like a crane. Did I just agree to something major? She asks. Not officially, you say, but your embroidery portfolio is now in 3 households and a temple. She shrugs. As long as they don't find my tofu poem. You laugh and place a candied lotus seed on the family balance scale. She adds a pearl button. They rest side by side, uneven but charming. That evening, she practices calligraphy in the flickering light, not for a groom, for herself. She writes the character for harmony, then flips the paper and writes freedom in smaller strokes beneath it. You don't say anything, but you steal the paper once she's done and hide it in your sleeve. Outside, the moon is rounder now, bold, unapologetic, kind of like your cousin. A rooster cries too early, the morning is gray and swollen with the promise of rain, and your joints crack like bamboo under tension. Today feels different, final, somehow. Not in the ominous, someone's getting exiled way just. The kind of quiet that makes you instinctively pack an extra dumpling and wear the socks with no holes. Everyone's been whispering lately, not in the gossipy who stole the chicken feed tone, but softer, heavier, and it all centers on the letter that arrived with imperial seals and far too many ribbons for anyone's comfort. The magistrate is coming. Mainstream historical fact. Imperial magistrates appointed by the central government were the backbone of local administration. They judged legal cases, managed tax collection, inspected public works, and acted as the emperor's far-off eyes and ears. To peasants, they were terrifying. To corrupt village elders, a career-ending audit in silk robes. Your grandmother calls a family meeting. Sweep the threshold. Offer incense. Hide the home-brewed rice wine, she mutters. You spend the morning polishing things you didn't know could be polished. The family tablet, the rooster's comb, the bonsai tree's pot. Your cousin even irons a scroll with the bottom of a teapot. Quirky tidbit. Some magistrates were known to disguise themselves and roam villages unannounced. There's a famous and probably embellished tale of a magistrate who posed as a tofu vendor to see how fairly villagers treated outsiders. The only man who offered him shade got a job in the court. The one who spit in his tofu ended up managing manure. When the magistrate arrives, it's not with trumpets or banners, but with the unsettling silence of someone observing too much, too fast. He's younger than expected, doesn't smile, carries a fan even though there's no sun. Your uncle bows so low you worry his back will never recover. Your grandmother presents an offering tray, peaches, a folded poem, and a calligraphy scroll of a poem allegedly written by a cousin of the famous Levi. The magistrate raises an eyebrow. He walks the village like he's gliding. Children scatter, chickens scatter. You consider scattering, but decide that would draw more attention. He inspects walls, roofs, the irrigation canal. Someone whispers he sniffed the rice jars. At noon, he calls a town gathering. You stand with your neighbors, squinting in the sun. He praises the clean pathways, notes the sturdy bridges, compliments the schoolmaster's pupils on their ink-brush discipline. Then he asks, "Where is your cemetery registry?" Your heart skips. The registry hasn't been updated since the Lantern Festival, which was several months, and a very unfortunate firecracker incident ago. The elders mumble. The magistrate says nothing but fans himself slowly. Historians still argue whether these inspections were genuinely about justice or more often about appearances, courts filled with theater, punishments meted for show, and judgment influenced by gifts wrapped in clever phrasing. Some magistrates were righteous and feared. Others, easily bought with lacquer boxes and poetic flattery. Yours seems to fall somewhere in the murky middle. After a long pause, he says, "I'll return in 1 week." You exhale so hard a passing leaf swirls away. Your entire village springs into repair mode. The registry is reconstructed overnight by your cousin, who fakes 3 generations worth of calligraphy with frightening skill. The schoolboys repaint public signs. Your neighbor bribes her rooster to act noble. You're in charge of fixing the bench outside the temple. You do this with 2 nails, a prayer, and a lot of strategic leaning. On the 7th day, the magistrate returns, reads, nods, doesn't smile, but doesn't frown either. Then, to your absolute shock, he accepts a cup of your grandmother's tea and compliments her efficient bamboo sweeping method, which is code in government circles for "I'm not exiling anyone today." The village breathes again. That night, your family gathers in the courtyard. No festival, no fanfare, just quiet gratitude and soup that tastes better than usual. Your cousin whispers, "We survived an inspection." Your grandmother says, "Don't jinx it." You offer her a sugared plum. She accepts, then winks. You slip away to the edge of the rice fields. The fireflies are out again. Their slow, pulsing glow mimics the quiet pride in your chest. You sit down on the cool earth, balance scale in your lap. You place today's plum on one side. On the other, the poem your cousin wrote on a scrap of fan paper during the inspection. They balance. You lean back. The stars above you are faint but enough. Faint, but always returning. Now, slow your breath. There's no more ink to spill tonight. You've seen dynasties rise and fall in the space of a few dumplings, balanced bribes with sugared fruit, and passed every absurd test thrown your way. The moon faithful, glowing spills over the rooftops like a final benediction. Let your thoughts grow softer now. Let the parade of ancestors and taxes and teacups fall away. Let go. The courtyard cools under the hush of midnight. You pull your robe a little tighter, feel the weight of the day finally slip from your shoulders. The shadows stretch long, but they don't reach you. Not now. All around you, the village has gone still. The crackling lanterns have dimmed. The arguments over ink and inheritance have faded into distant, dream-muffled echoes. Even the rooster, your alarm clock, your nemesisas, finally decided to give it a rest. Above, the stars don't shimmer. They just are. Steady, patient, soothing in their quiet watchfulness. You breathe in slowly. The scent of rain-kissed bamboo and faint incense still lingers in the air. Familiar, gentle. You think of everything you've seen: imperial audits, tofu scams, awkward matchmakers, endless scrolls, dumpling diplomacy, even that chicken duel from 3 villages over. And yet, somehow, you're still here, still whole. And maybe that's the lesson of it all. Life in Imperial China wasn't about survival in grand gestures. It was about balancing the daily absurdities with quiet, moment-small victories of warmth, humor, and grace. You shift on the bench. The night wraps itself around you like silk. A final breeze sweeps the courtyard, tugs your sleeve like a sleepy child. It's time. So close your eyes, let the rhythm of your breath carry you. Forget the taxes, forget the scrolls. For now, there's only calm. You've made it through another impossible day. Sleep well, History Walker.